Now, Trish is a high school teacher from Surrey, British Columbia, and she's been teaching for 30 years. 30 years. Congratulations, Trish. That's amazing. And she's going to help answer some questions on the topic of children and technology. How do we balance the overwhelming amount of technology options for developing kids, teenagers, and even our own selves as adults? We're all impressionable. How do we respect the privacy of our teenagers while keeping them safe, strong, and independent? Is an iPhone a privilege, a safety measure, or a deterrent from real human connections? These are just some of the questions we will discuss today. Trish, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I want to talk about this technology and how it interplays with everyday life. You know, what do you notice in school? How do you relate to people who are so immersed in this way of connection?
Well, I would say that it has become increasingly difficult in about the last 5 to 6 years. And pretty well every staff member that we talk to says the same thing. And we're actually focusing on that in our professional development at the moment. Because it is at a crisis point. We're at the point now where kids can't learn because we know from the research that it's impossible. It is absolutely impossible to think deeply and creatively while at the same time being distracted. All the research shows us that.
Right.
And the other frightening part is that, as you and I know, as every parent listening and any professional listening, people that employ young millennials, no, they can't focus on any particular task for very long if they have a smartphone with social media beeping and notifications coming in constantly. The brain is not wired to do that. The brain can only focus deeply on one thing at a time. And that is the frightening part, is a lot of people don't understand that. And so they think, yeah, I'll just check my messages and I'll get right back onto my paper, because it makes it very, very difficult to do. They can't actually. Yeah, it's almost impossible, to be honest. And so for a long time, I teach a whole unit on tech addiction in my psych class. And it's a course that I developed with my students. And for the last 5 years, I've been doing a similar program and, you know, always changing and adding new, as soon as new research comes up, sharing with the kids, and then always asking them what they feel and how they sit and how they see themselves. And I'll always have kids say, technology is not a problem for me, madam. I put my phone in my bag and it's gone. Right. And others say, I am so compelled to check my technology. And so we talk a lot about, you know, why that is and what they think's driving that behavior. And a lot of times they don't know what's driving that behavior. And I think that's why you and I in the past have talked about conformity. And I know we'll talk about that later on today. So that's a difficult thing when every single person is doing it. But I think also that depth of creativity and that ability to go deep places we're losing that. Not just children in high school, but young adults and anybody. Adults our age can also become addicted to their technology. It's not just inherent with teens. The problem is that teens' young brains are still forming, right? Right. And so we know that between the ages of about 16 to about 25, they're going through another major brain death, where synaptic pruning is happening and their prefrontal cortex is developing. And that's where the rational thought happens. So if they are constantly reinforcing the synaptic connections, right, which is where those thoughts happen, to drive towards technology, then they cannot actually develop the other avenues to develop maybe the thought for creative writing, you know, those kinds of things. And so that's really important. And I remember Sherry Turkle, who's a famous writer, speaker. She was on the front of Wired magazine in 1996 at the birth of the internet. That's how big she was. Wow. And in 2012, she gave yet another TED Talk. And this time it was about the internet and technology and how it's negatively affecting her students at MIT. And she's got several really good books that I recommend for your listeners. But one of them is called Reclaiming Conversation by Sherry Turkle. Reclaiming Conversation? Yeah. And she's got a couple of good books, but that one's a really good one about understanding the role of technology in our children's lives and in our lives in general. But basically what she says, and she was when she wrote this, she had been teaching for 30 years as well, but at MIT. Right. And she said, my students no longer write in essay format. They write in paragraphs. Their thoughts are disconnected and disjointed. They don't flow. She says, I can no longer find students that can write fully and deeply and develop a thesis from beginning to end. And that's incredibly powerful information coming from MIT. Some of the most brilliant students in the United States are going to this university. And these kids think that they can multitask, but actually we can't. The brain research shows it. We can't multitask. We're not.
You know, I was reading, and I don't know, you might know numbers, better than myself, but I was doing some research on this, and I read that approximately 8 trillion texts are sent every year with an open rate of 99%.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me at all.
No, and the typical response time is under 3 minutes.
Right.
And texting obviously is the preferred form of communication, but and mostly for individuals under the age of 50, right? Mm-hmm. And I also read that 1/4 of the teenagers going online are averaging about 52 hours per week.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Would you say that's about right?
More full-time job for sure. Yeah. And that would be combined with schoolwork as well as, social media. They use it for everything, right?
Yeah, but if you think about it and what you've just said, this number speaks to exactly what you just said, where you're saying, look, I'm in the classroom and here's what we're finding. And 52 hours, so they're in school 6.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so, okay. So,
30 hours a week of school and almost double that of being online. And here's the other thing that I've noticed. And this is the thing that's quite shocking when you look at the numbers from a long time pre-internet versus now, present time.
Yeah. Yeah.
My students say to me all the time, we're so stressed. We have so much work. You give too much homework. There's too much work. And I always say, really, what's really interesting about that is that I give less than half what I used to give.
Wow.
Less than half the amount of work.
Less than half in terms of homework.
And that's my academic class. That's French 12. Less than half. And the projects used to be in depth. And this was before the internet, when the kids didn't have access to the internet. They had to actually use books. And then they that can't be true. Well, I know it's true because and I remember my daughter doing this for a university paper that she had to get done. She had 6 papers that she had to have done in 8 days. And so she texted me and she said, Mom, just so you know, I'm leaving my phone at home because Kathleen and I need to go to the library and get this paper done. And we cannot have our phones with us. And post conversation, she comes home, texts me and like, so how'd that go? Oh my gosh. I cannot believe how fast we got this paper done. Mom, we got done in 3 hours. Normally it would take us 6 hours. She said, we couldn't believe how quickly we got our paper done. And I said, of course, because when distracted, as you quoted the stat I read was 23 minutes, that every time we are in full deep thought, and then we look to our phone to check a message or check a text or just see what my notification is on Instagram. Now it takes me another full 23 minutes is what the research that I read, but there's lots of different research. You look at that. Now, how do you get back to that depth of thought? Right. And what really that tells me then, because another text comes in, is that we never actually get to that full depth of thought. And that's what Sherry was talking about. And so that's what frightens me more than anything is that one of the books that I read called iMinds, fantastic book by Mari Swingle. She is a neuropsychologist. So she has got over 15 years of data showing children who suffered mostly from ADHD, most of her patients, coming in pre-internet and then post-internet. And so she ended up writing a book called iMinds, all about technology addiction and other types of addictions like porn addictions, etc. But several of the chapters focused on tech addiction and what she saw from a clinical perspective and what her data proved. And it was shocking. But basically what she said, and I really highly recommend, again, if people are interested in this kind of information, to read it for themselves. But what she said basically is that what she believes is that we are robbing our future generations of our artists. Because when we no longer have the wandering mind, and there's so much written on this now, Scientific American Mind just published something on it not too long ago. When our mind is not allowed to wander,
right,
we never go to boredom. And from boredom is when we start to go, and think. Then our mind goes to deeper. And now the neuroscience is starting to show that. This is the latest article I just read, was the actual neuroscience of what's happening in our brain synaptically. When our mind wanders, we go to the default mode network. It's powerful information for us to understand that this is science. This is not people's opinions anymore. This is science. And so if we know that, our beautiful little 3-year-old child, say some of your listeners that are listening that are wondering, should they let their children play on an iPad? I would scream no. Do not let your children play iPad games when they're 3. Right. When you go to a restaurant, do not put your smartphone in front of your child so you and your husband can talk. Right. They need to look around the restaurant and they need to draw. They need to draw or play with their Lego. And if they want to get in and out of their seat 10 times and you have to get up 10 times, that's all part of development. That's all part of your childhood.
So it's almost like we're numbing them. You see that, right? Like, I'm sure, Trish, you and all the listeners out there have been in a restaurant where you're sitting there and you're having a conversation with your person that you're with, and you see that couple or those people who are just eating it on their phone. They're not even talking.
Yeah, we see it all the time. And you know what I say to my students all the time, and I think this is really important. I always operate from a point of compassion. And I say, there but for the grace of God go I. Because when I had my little children, the internet did not exist. Mine are 17, 19, and 21. And they just missed the birth of the internet. Sure, they got their phones when they were, 12 and 13.
Yeah.
But they still were affected by their phones. And I would say definitely one, if not 2 of my children are very connected to their phones. Yeah. And we're challenged all the time. And I have lots of rules.
Me as well.
But what I say to them is it is very easy for us to criticize young parents when we see them and give their kid an iPhone, give their kid an iPad so that they can sit down and have a coffee. And I always tell them the story of when I was in a Starbucks and my youngest child was only he was about 18 months and my other one was 3 and a bit. Wow. And in the days when in Starbucks they had baskets full of toys. Yeah. And so I was sleep deprived and I 3 toddlers, and I was going for coffee with a friend, and I was desperately needing adult conversation. And my youngest got up on the back of a chair because he was bored of the toys in the basket, fell backwards, split his head open, gushing blood. And I always tell that story for a reason, because it would have been so easy for me to say, okay, I'm sleep deprived. I need 5 minutes. I'm just going to play this little game on the iPad. And those are the challenges that we are faced with. And then just magnify those challenges when they're adolescents and they're screaming that they hate us because we take their phones away from them. Yeah. And that's really, really hard. And I've been there, as I'm sure you have too.
Oh, I have. And I've just said, well, I know you'll hate me for a small moment. Yeah. Because I'm so awesome. And guess what? Fine. But it's really strange to me. And, I even noticed after I started doing this research, I was like, maybe I think I'm addicted too. I work from this office and my work is on my phone. So I never have that time where I go to an office and I come back and I leave my work. It's always here. And this need for connection, this need for me to feel, I need to connect to that. A good example of this is that I think, and maybe you can speak to this, can we talk about the feeling of that is being created now with people, that they get everything immediately? And if you do not respond immediately, it's like, what? I text you. Yeah, I didn't answer your text. But why? Well, because, whatever the reason, but do you see and can you speak to this instant gratification? I mean, if our numbers are right, is the typical response, it says here is typical response time is under 3 minutes.
And I would say for adolescents, it's probably even less.
Yeah.
You know, so yes, it can absolutely speak to instant gratification. And again, it comes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's hardwired.
Hardwired.
Hardwired, yeah. So the earlier that we expose our children to technology, the earlier they are absolutely compelled to check and to respond, because their brains are designed for dopamine. We're all designed for the hit of dopamine. It feels good. And what we need to understand is how addiction works. So addiction is that reward pathway anticipation in the brain, right? So you anticipate the reward, and as soon as you check the text and you see, it's just my mom, whatever, it's gone. But now you're anticipating the next. So that's the hardwired. That's the neuroscience. So the dopamine comes when we're anticipating the reward, not when we get the reward, which is why when you're a shopaholic, when you're on Instagram and you're checking your favorite blog for your favorite, I don't know, clothing designer, you are desperate to continually check it, because that's how you get the hit of dopamine, that you get it in anticipation of the next new thing. We are hardwired that way because it's primal, right? That's why we survive, because we're wired for novelty. That's how our brains are wired. So the computer and the smartphone have been designed, particularly Snapchat and Instagram, are designed by neuroscientists from Harvard, from Princeton. They know what they're doing, and they are designing this to absolutely compel us to want more and buy more and consume more. And there's a greater conversation about consumerism, but it is absolutely connected to that. Tristan Harris is an amazing speaker out of Silicon Valley, who's actually was the whistleblower on all of this. And he has a great TED Talk talking about how software designers absolutely need to take responsibility and start designing apps that help us, like Moment. I don't know if you're familiar with Moment, but that's an app I recommend for your listeners. And what Moment does is it tracks how much you use your cell phone. And
I'd like that.
Yeah, so I actually recommend to my students to download it. And there's quite a few now available online in the App Store. At first, Apple was saying, no, we're not going to do that. And then they got really exposed and made to look quite bad. 60 Minutes did a piece on it as well. And suddenly Apple is now allowing those on the App Store. So there's lots of ways to help us. And that's, hopefully we'll get to talk today about how to help, because we know the problems are serious, obviously.
Well, we know the problems are serious, and you know, and helping is it's frightening. Because what it does is it puts the onus back on communication and back on this need it's that the person feels disconnected, even though they're not, right?
We're alone together is what Sherry Turkle says.
We're alone together.
We're alone together, yeah. And there's just so much written on that. Actually, that's the name of her other book, Alone Together.
Alone Together. I'm writing all these down, and then we'll go over them.
That's you know, there's just so much written on this. I know that your listeners could for sure be inundated by the amount of information out there. I think the most important thing is what you're doing, which is having authentic conversations with parents and teachers. People say, here's what I've done. Here's what I'm trying to do. It's not perfect. We still have problems. We still have challenges in my family with my teens and their phones. But I think the most important thing is that we're mindful and we're talking about people.
Well, and I think the thing is that, you know, for me to say we had this under control would be a lie.
Of course.
For me to say that in the summer while I'm working, that my 8-year-old daughter isn't on Wii or on her iPad would not be truthful, because frankly, I find it convenient.
Of course.
And but then I think back to all my other babies and I go, wait a second. You know, there's a whole bunch of different things that filter into that. But the biggest thing for me, I think, as parents, and we need to shoulder the responsibility of saying this is convenient. And so we have to wear that, I believe. And But then again, you're not taking your kid's phone before they go to school. Most of us have a purpose for that. We give our kids the phone because we want to know where they are, right? Like it's just a
whole other conversation, actually, because parents actually fuel a lot of the problems as well.
Well, we do.
Our parents didn't have to know where we were. When we were at school, we were at school. And
my mom and dad expected us. And and I think that's a good point, Trish. My parents expected me to be where I said I was.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that too, like, I think it's really important to give the message that technology and smartphones can be wonderful things.
Oh, it's great.
Wonderful things. There's lots of positives, and it's not all or none. It's balance. Everything is all about balance. In the classroom, I think that our days of understanding balance are numbered. I've done quite a bit of research on it for our September professional development, where I put together a lesson with one of my other colleagues with some really cool kind of little clips on YouTube, where we found schools that have gone completely cellular free, no cell phones allowed in their school, and what they've seen and the changes they've had. Then then there's another clip that I found online of a university professor who asks that her students only use the cell phones when she asks them to, and the laptops as well. She asks them to take notes with their hands.
Wow.
We're doing a lot of research now on that at the university level, and many of my students are coming back to tell me this, that you cannot absorb, and we know this in iMinds, she talks about it, Mari Swingle.
Yeah.
You don't learn the same way. They're different synaptic pathways when you write something versus when you type it into a computer. And
very true.
So what we're seeing now is kids that are taking actual old school notes in university are absorbing it differently and more profoundly than if they were just typing. And plus, as we all know, if you have your Mac open in the classroom, you probably have 2 or 3 different tabs open.
You do.
You're not just focused on the professor's lecture.
You're not.
The lecture, you've got your Facebook or your Instagram open, you're texting with your mom in the corner, you're doing different things. And we can't do that. We just know that the brain can no longer do that. I mean, the brain's never been able to do that, actually. But people seem to think they can. And the reason they think they can is because they kind of pull it off. They kind of pull off the B and the relationship. But what we're seeing is the quality of all of these things is going downhill. It's declining, the quality.
And the quality of writing, like what we talked about, but writing is so important. Like how to write a business email or a business, it's not like you are, meaning you are. It's like, it's not, it's YOU space ARE. Like this is what we're looking at. And so how to greet and I was really shocked at when I've ever edited people in my household's papers. I'm like, where's the grammar? What's going on? And it's like this is shorthand, but it's not shorthand. It's something different. It's text speak. Yeah, that's right. It's a new language. Yeah. So, we have to figure that out as a community, I think. And this is the challenge, because when I was putting this lesson together with my colleague for next year, we have a new timetable next year called Flex Time. And so there's going to be time in that first block where the kids actually have time to do important things that are not prescribed by the teacher. And so what we decided as a committee is that we're going to come up with some really good lessons for the first week of Flex Time that teachers could choose to show their students and do with their students. All the kinds of lessons. One is the tech lesson that I'm talking to you about, because my proposal to our staff was that we do not allow phones during Flex Time. Wow.
Flex Time is 40 minutes a day. And if kids don't have any homework to do in that 40 minutes, because it's not supposed to be prescribed learning from the teacher, then we should have board games in our classroom. We should have decks of cards in our classroom. This is a good time for teachers to get to know their students on a different level. Why don't you play Risk and keep it going, put it to the side? Why don't you build a puzzle? Why don't you read a book? And teachers can have lots of books in their classrooms because kids don't pick up books anymore. So these are all, I already do the book reading once a week in my French class. And I can't believe how many things there are that we can do. And instead, my fear is that what's going to happen is that some people, teachers included, will not want to have to fight with kids during those 40 minutes because the teachers will see, hey, I need time too to do my marking, to do my, so they go to do their work. And then in that 40 minutes, we lose the opportunity to connect with our students. And this is what I'm really pushing for. But of course, it has to happen on people's own terms, right?
But and it also has to start happening in a home environment too. That's the best way to get reinforcement, I think, as a school and as a teacher, is when the person that's in the home who has another level of relationship is supporting from the other side. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, I recently read an article that suggested that we are not addicted to the smartphone, but what we are addicted to is social interaction.
Of course, it's always about
and the need to socialize. And there seems to be this common thread that runs through media and devices where you have the opportunity to connect to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and you get the information that fuels this basic need that has been since the foundation of human existence, which is, this connection.
Yeah. And so that's the key to my addiction unit. So we're not just talking smartphones, we're talking any kind of addiction. The opposite of addiction is connection. Some of my students actually tease me that when they hear that line, they think of me.
Can I just, so let's pause. I think I have not heard that.
Yeah. And
I want to say it to you again. The opposite of addiction is connection.
Correct. So basically as long as it's connection with a real human being, obviously, is what we're talking about. So basically take anything that we're addicted to, whether it be alcohol, marijuana, smartphones, it doesn't really matter what it is.
Sure.
We are hardwired for attachment as human beings, right?
Yes.
We are social beings. And when we talk about conformity and peer pressure, all of that, social media plays into all of that, right?
Right.
So we are hardwired to belong and to attach. The only human beings that are not wired that way are psychopaths, right? Because their brains actually are not wired the same way. Their brains don't function the same way. Different parts of their frontal lobe do not wire the same way as ours do. So they don't actually look for connection. They don't need it.
Right.
The rest of us do. So that means all the rest of us need connection. So if a young child, particularly adolescents, when they're the most vulnerable, this is the hardest time of their lives. The majority of human beings, you ask anybody our age, they will tell you, I never would want to be a teenager again. Ever. Whenever I tell people that I'm a high school teacher, they say, oh my goodness, isn't that hard? And I say, no, it's amazing. But the reason it's amazing is because my students know that I totally understand how hard it is for them to be a teenager. Yes, and I do not say, which a lot of adults do, if you think your life is tough, just try having a mortgage. Just try having bills. Just try having people angry with you at work. I'm like, are you kidding me?
You don't say that.
Well, and adults do it all the time. I hear my students tell me this all the time, that they go through this with their parents who don't understand the stress they have. No. And then social media makes it worse for them, or they're numbing with alcohol, which is, I think the stat I was just reading in the conformity article that I was reading by Dumas, 2012 research study that she did on identity development, identity exploration, they call it, and identity commitment. So these are
identity exploration and identity commitment.
So these are the two things that young teens go through.
Interesting.
And what all the research shows us is if the higher amount of identity exploration and commitment that a young person, let's say from age 14 to 18, high school years, let's say grade 9, grade 8, the higher that is, the lower correlation to substance abuse, to risk-taking behaviors, any kind of risk-taking behaviors. So the research has been done over and over and over again since the 60s. But basically what we're saying is, if we teach our children that to explore who they are and then eventually start to commit to who they are, that will help them when it comes time for the difficult things in the teen world, which is conformity. You need to belong to the cool group. And if you don't, you're blacklisted, right? And you're bullied and all sorts of things. Right. And that is incredibly challenging for kids. But what we do know for sure is kids that have a sense of, what are my values? What do I want for myself? Where do I see myself in the future? Even if they don't have those answers, those questions are there. The exploration, and then the commitment starts to happen around grade 11 or 12, but it certainly doesn't get fixed until much later, like 3-4 years later, right around 22, 23 years of age. They start to really kind of come into their own and understand, you know, a little bit more of who they are and what they believe in, you know. But the teen years, as you know, are so incredibly difficult, and we need to address that. We need to, as adults, we need to say to our teens, I understand it hurts.
Absolutely. I say to my kids, high school is like the game of Survivor. It's like watching Survivor on TV, except my kids go every day to that. And I didn't enjoy my elementary years, my high school years. I didn't enjoy those for a variety of reasons. And it's just, you know, that I still unravel to this day, because it was so formative in my life. And the patterns that I created, just the fact that I didn't get good grades, that I was a C- student and I felt stupid, was enough to stop me from moving forward in my life until I was 39 years old. I just believed that I was not intelligent. And it seeded this deep seed of unworthiness. It brought forward fear. I mean, it was like, so all of that happened. I know where that happened. And so when we're looking at our kids and we're saying, I look at my kids every day and I just go, every morning you can ask my kids, I look at them and I give them the biggest kiss and I say, I want to be the only person in your life that will greet you this way. I just missed you for that 12 hours that I was away from you while we were all sleeping. But I want you to know that you're going into the lion's den today and I'm here if you need it. And I think that is a really important message, especially as we move into this next phase of conversation around conformity, and really this concept that I didn't really get until I was doing the research, which was this definition started coming up. My kid is antisocial. My kid is antisocial. And what followed it was, they're not antisocial at all, they're hyper social. And so you send your kid to school. The biggest thing that I'm thinking is, who are you hanging out with? What happened? Like all these questions at the end of the day. Did you feel okay? What happened when that happened? What about that? What about that? And well, you just worried. You're worried about them being lonely or antisocial, but really they have connection in the social media world that it creates this hyper socialization where, you know, explain it to me.
Well, what happens is that the problem, as you know, is that we only post our best bits. So if you're right, so and they craft them and they filter their photos, and you know, it's only in the last couple of years that I've been taking photos with younger people and say, oh, can I sit up? Can I be on that side? It's my better side. I'm like, what?
Yeah, or you're like in the big fat Greek wedding too, where they pull the face back when they take the photo.
Yeah, I'm laughing because honestly, I'm in my 50s. I do not know if I have a better side. I have no idea if I have a better side. I don't do selfies. And if I do selfies, I think I probably can count them on two hands, right?
Right.
I mean, just because it's silly and you're with your kids. But the reality is that they are so compelled to post those best bits. And then, as we all know, we all have days. We all have down days. We all have fights with our children. Photos are the most classic. You know, you've got teenagers. I have three teenagers. I want a whole family photo on Mother's Day. And, you know, can we all just smile together? And maybe stand on the, oh, mom, I don't want to take a picture. I don't like my hair today, or I don't like how, and so you're just trying to get a photo. And the end is fighting to get a family photo. And then you post this beautiful family photo on Facebook for the old people, or on Instagram if you're young. And what do you get? You get, oh, I love my family so much. So now, meanwhile, another woman who had a Mother's Day that's been awful because her kids forgot about her, checks my post out and goes, oh my God, Trisha's life is so amazing. She's so lucky. She doesn't know behind the scenes that I was trying to get my kids to take the photo with me. It's all crafted. And I mean, even if I don't even know what side I look good on, I certainly know that I want people to think I'm happy.
And this is really important.
Right?
Because I was talking to somebody, I was doing an interview with a family whose child has autism. Mm-hmm. And I can't actually remember the family, but I remember the conversation, the tone. And they said something that was really important to me. They said, you know, my life, I had to stop looking at Facebook because my life was so terrible compared to, I was holding on by the thinnest thread that when I would look at my friends, I would feel depressed. I would feel alone. It would isolate me further. And I'd say to myself, why aren't you seeing me? Why are you doing this? You're all, excited about everything, but you don't know me. You've forgotten about me. Exactly. You know
that the research is out on Facebook. It's obviously new research. There's not enough of it that's been, replicated, but there is research out there that shows a high correlation of depression for the more you use Facebook.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Instagram research hasn't come out yet, but it will, and it will.
It will. Oh yeah.
In the same numbers, I believe.
Yeah.
So what's the solution?
Right.
What is the solution? And it always comes back to a sense of mindfulness, a sense of understanding connection, what real connection feels like and looks like. Because when our children get a sense of identity exploration and they start to figure out who they are, then they don't so much care as much about what that person just posted on Instagram, because they actually like to do, I don't know, like Luke doing his thrift shopping and then sewing with his best buddy and making these cool pieces of clothing. Just because it's fun and different, and he likes to look different.
I like that.
His older sister likes Aritzia, and he's like, but I don't like that style. I like my own style. So there's that identity exploration, which I really encourage, right? Because then he doesn't care so much going into grade 12. He doesn't really care too much about the kids that are all drinking and doing that kind of stuff, which is pretty typical at his age now.
Yeah.
He's a pretty cool kid, but he doesn't need to do those kinds of things because he has a sense of who he is and what he wants to do. And I know that your kids are similar.
They are. Yeah. And the question I have to you is, can you say to the listener, because I don't want to ever forget these most important things and just adding a why or how to in there. Yeah. So this identity exploration, what, in your opinion, would be the first step? If somebody was just going to take a step, what would you suggest as a first step, a first thought, a first move towards, this value and belief that you talk about, where the identity exploration sort of begins to...
Well, I think you and I both know that's a very, very heavy-seated question, because identity exploration starts at a very young age.
It does.
It happens in the micro moments. It happens in the little conversations that we have with our children. It happens in the good nights and in the good mornings. It happens when they are breaking your rules and how you deal with it. Yeah. All of those things come back to, do you have a solid sense of yourself as a parent? What is important to you? And therefore model that and live that, because we can talk all we want as parents and as teachers. And the same goes for me as a teacher. If I stand in front of all of my students and tell them, this is what I think is important, you guys, but they know that I'm not living my life that way, they're not listening to me for 5 seconds, but I continually make myself vulnerable in front of my students. I tell them mistakes that I've made, about what I learned from those mistakes, about how I'm growing. We talk a lot about mindfulness and meditation in my classes, and I lead my students through some meditations every semester. And I tell them, I'm very new at this. I've only been doing it for 1.5 years. I'm very new at it. And yet my whole life I said, I'd like to learn how to meditate, maybe someday. Finally, I did it. And I tell them, there is no right or wrong to meditation. There is no right or wrong to mindfulness. It is just about being present. It doesn't mean you have to close your eyes and get all zen and you don't have to do any of that. All you have to do is try to bring yourself to the present moment when there are things going on with your team, like where they are tonight. Why aren't they home on time for curfew?
So would you say to the young teenager, young adult, the first step towards this path before you commit really to your identity is to move into a place of mindfulness, awareness of your body, move into an awareness of what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and we're encouraging, you and I are having this conversation because the exhortation is read a book. Yeah. Begin to move and understand that technology is an important gift. We get that, but we must begin to pull ourselves away a little bit because there's.
Reading a book is a big step for a lot of kids. Sadly,
it is.
It's a big step.
Huge.
So how about when you're reading whatever your favorite blog is, ask important questions of those.
Oh, even better. Scrap what I said, everyone. Scrap what I said. Go with Trish.
I think that's totally legit, reading a book, but I think that those are big steps. I see it. It's hard for me to get students to read books. It's hard for me to get my own children to read books. I know how hard that is, and I just went to the library today. Like, I love books, right?
Okay, but Trish, this is really important, what we're saying here. What you just said to me is huge. It didn't even dawn on me. Okay.
So small steps, critical thinking. Ask, who wrote this? So this is what I teach in my course all the time. Like, so you're reading something online. Check and see the bio of that person. Where are they coming from? Like, what's their background? And I don't necessarily mean, you guys, do they have a PhD? That's wonderful if they have a PhD. But what is their story? What is their story? What do they bring to the table? Okay. Because, for example, one of my favorite authors at the moment, Glennon Doyle Melton, who I told you wrote Love Warrior. She does not have a PhD, and yet she has one of the most watched TED Talks of all time, besides Brene Brown and Sir Ken Robinson, both of which I highly recommend. And you listen to her words, and where does her experience come from? It comes from a very difficult childhood where she built up amazing resilience. And with that resilience, the way she developed her resilience is by stepping back and looking at her life and questioning all the time, questioning. Yeah. And that is what I endeavor to do. I don't give my students the answers. There are no right answers in my psychology class. One of the reasons why they say the class is hard, because I require them to critically think, and I require them to ask themselves, what am I interested in? What do I want to know about? So when they have to add their main assignment, one of the main assignments is a profound question. So what is jealousy? Why are people jealous? Are girls more jealous than boys? At what age do we get like this? What is it that propels us to it? And all these micro questions that come from it. And they say to me, that was really cool. Thanks for asking me to do that.
You call it a profound question.
Yeah. Well, Ireland did a couple of them for me.
She sure did.
And when you do a profound question, what it gets you to do is to start thinking about the things that you're curious about. Right?
Sure.
That curiosity is what we're trying to nurture in kids, because when you're curious, then you can think outside the little social media bubble that you've been sucked into, that vortex you've been sucked into, like all kids get sucked into, most kids get sucked into, because then you start saying, oh, wow, this really is just a bubble, isn't it? And when I look outside of this bubble, there's so many other bigger questions and more interesting things. It's why I bring people in my classroom to tell their stories all the time. Just like you're doing on your podcast, I do in my classroom. I want people to come in and tell their story, Because then they go, oh, that's what fourth year university looks like.
Because it forces a moving outside of yourself. It forces you to move away from here, and you're looking out and you're going, okay, now that person, I just watched them, or I heard them talk. They have an experience they're sharing. So now it becomes this other level for people.
Yeah, that's where the exploration happens.
Okay.
And for your listeners, particularly parents, it's one of the keys, I believe, to good parenting is to then, when your children become adolescents, to encourage the friends that you have in your life who are similarly minded, who have similar values to you, to please parent my child. I'm happy to parent yours. It takes a community to parent children. And I try to do that for my students. I try to be another parent when they tell me how much they don't like their mom at the moment. I remind them regularly that my children didn't like me either. And then they laugh, no. And I'm like, of course, because I'm their mom. And so I always push them to think outside of their little bubble. And I think that when parents can do that, when parents can say, hey, I need help. Can you help me? Because Lori, I don't know how to do this. My kid's addicted to her phone. Can you help me? We don't do that enough. And we don't go online, but we're afraid to tell our friends that things are difficult. We're afraid to tell the people that we love the most that we need help. And
because if you're following Brene Brown, you're knowing there's this daring greatly. And it's about this aspect of shame that we all feel. But this translates, because then you move into, we're still talking about this hyperconnectivity. We're still talking about this. We're moving into this other aspect where there's shame. And you're constantly hyperconnectivity, hypersocial is when you're constantly checking what your friends are up to on social media. Every few minutes, every second. Constant. This is where the addiction comes from. This is kind of the birthplace where you need to watch and monitor others. So this privacy is, you're not really, and you're only showing things that you really want people to see. I mean, when you look at people's profiles, you always see their best self, right? It's not like, no makeup, it's like, it's that,
Absolutely.
It's very interesting.
Remember when was it Amanda? What was her name? Amanda?
Yes.
A brain fart. Amanda Todd.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick, in the background there.
Thank you, Rick. Amanda Todd story came out. And I remember the number one question, and this was earlier in tech addiction. People didn't really understand, weren't even having this conversation back in those days.
No, we weren't.
Why would she keep going back? People kept saying, why does she keep going back? And here's the thing, because you keep going back because you think maybe this time somebody will like me. Maybe this time somebody will say to me, you matter, Amanda. Don't listen to those other people, but nobody did. And that is, of course, as we all know, cyberbullying happens because it's so much easier to say things behind a screen than face to face. I know there was...
Well, and this is the downside, right? We talked about, there's this, there's always this, there's a dark side of this connection. And the dark side is there's an inappropriate online content. I mean, we don't need to get into that, but what is more in my mind is the bullying, the threatening, the sextortion, which is, nude photos or whatever that is. It's I'm dating you, so could you show me your tatas? It's like, what? Like, what? I mean, when I was dating, it was like, yeah, you know what? There's none of that. It's like there's a level.
You had a sense of self, and you were learning about your sense of self through your family and your small community. But now what our children are exposed to is this massive online community, and lots of people are doing it. So is it that big of a deal? Right? And so there's no kind of sense of value. There's no sense of this is right, this is morally right, and this is not morally right.
Right.
And that gut reaction that we get when we know something's morally wrong, our kids are learning to not listen to that. And we need to teach our children to listen to their gut. Because, and I say that to my students all the time, fear is a gift. Fear is a gift.
It's a gift.
Feel it. It's primal. Is why we survived as a species. There's lots written on it, Darwin being the first. And that fear will protect you. But absolutely, particularly young girls are taught to be nice, be kind. And so we quell our fear and we push it down. And this just hashtag Me Too movement is just so amazing for me. Because we're saying to girls through social media, through a wonderful medium that can be wonderful as well as negative, through this wonderful medium, that our kids are learning that, hey, hashtag Me Too, right? All these women have been, hurt by other people, and they are victims, and they're saying, no more, I'm not taking this anymore. And our girls, this is a positive, can see that and say, I see. So I don't have to do this. But those conversations have to take place in real time. They can't just happen online. And this is the problem, is that a lot of parents will tell you, well, my kids want to hear me tell them. My kids don't want to hear me nag at them. All they ever do is talk all day long. And then if I try to say those things to my own children, they'll roll their eyes at me. They'll, whatever. And
mom.
Like a teenager. But I think the key is you still say them. You still say it. Whether they're rolling their eyes at you or whether you don't think they're listening, they are listening and they are watching you.
Well, and I think this is really important because I was talking to a family a while ago who had an issue with this sextortion issue. And, it just scratched the surface for me because this individual literally, it was this group. And the powerful thing for me, I said, what was the first thing you did? They responded, I shut down social media. And then I realized who my real friends were.
Exactly.
And she said, I had 60, 70 kids that made me feel valuable. Who doesn't feel valuable when you've got 5,000 hits or 5,000 likes or, I'm amazing.
But it's not.
But then it's not real. It's when the dust settles and there's one friend.
That's right.
And then that's depression, right? And it's like, okay, now I'm depressed because I only really have one friend. And not only are you dealing with depression, but with cyberbullying and the threatening, it moves into this group dynamic that is groups can be powerful, but it is also can be very dangerous.
Of course. I mean, there's lots written on that in social psychology. I mean, you could go on for a long time talking about groupthink and group conformity and the social pressure and social norms and what's okay and what isn't okay. But at the end of the day, we have to look at the child themselves. And what I think we've lost in our own homes, Lori, and it's why the kids want so badly in my class to talk all the time. Wow. They let's just talk, man. Let's talk. Is because people are not talking anymore. They're not having the conversations that you and I are having. No. They're not talking about these things. No. And so, for example, let's go back to your example of I only have one friend. Well, I say that regularly to my students. You only need one friend.
Only one.
You only need one friend. You need one trusted adult in your life. Yep. You need one friend. And don't let anybody else tell you anything differently. You just need one good friend who gets you, who will be there for you. And what is a friend, by the way? A friend is someone who makes you feel good about who you are.
Absolutely.
That's it. They make you feel good about who you are. And that's right. They can do that. If a friend can make you feel good about who you are and you do the same for your friend, there's a friendship. But if you're constantly questioning who you are and what you wear and how you look and how you speak because this person is questioning you all the time, that's not a friend. And they struggle with knowing what that looks like because we don't even talk about it anymore. And because somebody has 2,000 friends on Instagram, we think that means they're super popular people. No, that's right. That's not real friendship. So whether or not they roll their eyes at you or not as a parent, Talk about your own friendships. Talk about your struggles with your friends. Talk about how your friendships have changed and what's important to you. And again, they will probably roll their eyes at you, but they are still listening. They hear it. And I'm telling you, I know this from my own personal experience as a parent and also in the classroom. And I think that that's super powerful information. It is the micro moments that create relationships with our children. And we need to focus on that. There's no big fix. There's not one size fits all. All you need to do is be real about who you are with your children. Be real about your love. When you mess up, apologize. It's all in kindergarten. But talk to your children, even if they don't want to talk to you. They don't have to talk to you.
Can we talk about, well, what you say is true. And I think the most powerful thing that I'm hearing from you, and you've been repeating it over and over again, is micro moments. And I parent that way. I interact with myself in micro moments. It's always like, well, why did I do that? Why am I doing this? But can we talk about conformity? Like, about what are you thinking? What do you see happening here? Because
I mean, we know that there's like I was quoting the research earlier, that we know there's so much research on conformity. We know that it starts typically, it used to start later. Now it's starting earlier. So around, grade 6, even grade 5, unfortunately, see young children starting to realize, I don't fit. I feel I don't really fit in. And so they will do different things to try to fit in. They may numb themselves through whatever it may be, unfortunately for a lot of our girls, as they get to grade 9, grade 8 and grade 9, we start to see eating disorders, those kinds of abilities to try to numb themselves. Why? Because they are in control of that, right? They need some kind of control over their lives, and they feel completely out of control when it comes to social media. So it is an incredibly difficult landscape to navigate. And what I believe is that when you give kids the information about what we're talking about here, so social psychology, basically, conformity, social norms, all of those different things, when you tell them about it, and then you say, guess what? Here's the research. Here's what it shows, or just even give an example of what happened to you as a kid, but then tell them that this is what happens all the time. This is what the bystander effect is. This is what this is. And then even if they don't go, wow, that's interesting, they're still thinking, oh, so when I do that. And so when we talk about it in the class, 11 and 12, my students will tell me, by grade 11 and 12, madam, we're not really conforming as much anymore. They're still conforming. You and I still conform. We all conform. I mean,
absolutely.
I wouldn't be buying my clothes at Aritzia if I didn't conform, right?
Me either. Or my makeup at Sephora.
Exactly. So we all conform. It doesn't mean you're weak, but what it does mean is that you're just human. It's part of being human, conforming. The point is that we have to teach our children to not lose themselves within that conformity. And so that's where the identity.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, identity exploration and then commitment comes in. So by about grade 11 and 12, like I was saying to you, and even up until, 2-3 years post-secondary, they start to kind of get a sense of, who am I? What do I want to do with my life? What am I passionate about? What do I love to do? What can I do to make a difference in the world? Those questions start to happen with identity commitment. But identity exploration is that kind of painful age between grade 5, 6, and about grade 10. Long time. And this is, where we have, just recently a tragedy, of course, in our neighborhood that was so tragic, is that we see this incredible push to drink and to do risky behaviors. And it's just heartbreaking because they all go through it. Everybody goes through it, but it's about whether or not that alcohol is just a little bit too heavy, or the drugs were just a little bit too much and they didn't expect that they were going to take what they took, or, were they pressured to taking it, all of those things. And we know that research shows that. And
I think, and I heard months and months ago, and this isn't just exclusive in our community, this is exclusive in every community, I would imagine. There's kids that start to drink, and then they drink, and they this particular person's getting, all the shots and whatever, and then they go unconscious. And it's like, there's something there that, what happens to the group, and why is there not one person that just sort of goes, this isn't right? I was talking to my kids about it because of different tragedies and different things that we've been hearing, around the world, and just looking at this research. And I'm saying to my kids, okay, so you have a phone, and it's so easy just to sort of pretend you're taking a call from somebody and phone 911, or what stopped, Trish, do you know what's stopping this?
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what we're talking about. Their brains are not fully developed, right? They're not able to think rationally. That's where the prefrontal cortex is the bed of rational thought. So if you're 14 years old and you see this risk-taking behavior going on, now let's add alcohol to the mix. Right. You have literally lost your ability. You are offline. Yeah. You are not thinking, I'll just pretend to call 911. You're not thinking that way. Because your brain is not wired to do that. And not at all. What we need to understand, there's no rational thinking there, right? Okay. So we have to understand, and conformity is powerful. Remember, again, it's primal. We are designed to live in groups. We are designed to attach. Yep.
And we're going in the same direction.
Right? Churches, everything.
Absolutely.
We have our little groups, right?
Yeah, animals do it,
Animals do it. And of course, for human beings, typically it's about, like with monkeys, they say the group is about 50. And once monkeys expand past 50, then they break into two different tribes or two different groups. Human beings, they say, is about 250. It's a great YouTube video you can put on your links called The Innovation of Loneliness. Just a short video that I show my students to help them to understand, what's the science behind conformity and why we need to belong so much. And so social media is a perfect vehicle to speak to that primal need to belong. And this is the thing. It moves us down. What you're saying then drops us down another level into mental health, into the pressure on you mentally to be perfect, to always be on, to, show that your life is perfect. And heaven forbid it look weird. It's like really weird. It's not in the frame right now, but I have these, 3 little ceramic cats that were my grandmother's. Mm-hmm. And somebody said to me, why would, how ugly is that? And I was like, well, I don't give a crap, number one. And number two, that was my grandma's. Like, how lovely. It's a piece of my childhood. These were something that I adored. And yet you're like, but it's not current. And I was like, it isn't. Like, and so your point is that even at our age, people are still doing it, right? It's not
still doing it.
Right. It never goes away because it's part of being human. But the point is in adolescence, it's at its most challenging. Because one, we force them into a group dynamic that they have no control of. They do not have control of who walks the hallways. No. Okay. They don't have control of who's in their class. They have no control whatsoever. No. They don't even have any control about how the teacher speaks to them. They have to respect the teacher. So you have this incredibly difficult environment. And unless you have classroom where, like, the kids would say to me all the time, when I walk into your classroom, I just feel like it's a safe haven where I can just breathe, right? Yeah. And that is the point, is that education and our homes, so our classrooms and our homes, should ideally be places where kids can feel safe, because the rest of the world isn't very safe. Right. And that is reality. So we have to.
And some kids are...
Right?
And some kids are coming to your class and their home is the least safe place and they're enjoying your class and the safety that you bring. That's the power of the teacher. That's the community that you were talking about earlier, where, you know, you might be the friends, you might be the mother to the friend, but you can still have this impact in anyone's life in any way.
As long as we're authentic and we're not trying to pretend that we have all the answers. We don't have answers. No. Whether we're, you know, 30-year veteran teachers or a brand new teacher, we don't have all the answers. All we can do is listen to each other, whether it be adult to adult, adult to child. Just listen to each other, try to hear each other, and ask questions. Ask them, what's going on for you? What happened to you? How are you feeling? You know, and when they know they're in a safe place and you can support them with that, then there's so much more that can come from that.
Absolutely. And on this mental wellness and the pressure, I was reading that the pressure to be on 24/7, how do you interact with that in the classroom setting? Because there's a lot of anxiety about that. And I was talking to somebody, actually a teenager a while ago, and they were saying that there's text messages being sent in the night. And the pressure to respond to those messages, because you might miss something, is really huge. Do you agree with that, or have you noticed that?
It's real. And when I ask I know it's real. When I ask my students how they respond to it, by about grade 11 and 12, particularly the kids that are taking my classes, because they're actually interested in the why and how of human behavior, they're starting to realize to put it away, right? And so, like for me, I think I shared with you before, with my kids, as soon as they got their phones, we had a really clear rule. As of 10 o'clock on a school night, the phone came into a closet and everybody's phones are put away. On weekends, they get to decide. And in the summertime, they get to decide. And here's the thing, why? Why would I do that? Now I'm going to let them become addicted over the summer, or now they're going to become addicted on the weekends. And the point is that we have to allow kids to have a little bit of control so they can learn self-regulation. So then when something happens, like they're late for their appointment because they slept in on that weekend, then you can say, did you put that phone away on time this weekend? Yeah. But during the week, we need to be helping them with that because they can't do it. It is an addiction. It is not about willpower. People need to understand that tech addiction is a real thing. The Chinese have done an immense amount of research. If people are interested, they should watch Web Junkies on Netflix. It's a very frightening documentary on China's response to how to deal with technology addiction, which is, in my humble opinion, not very effective, where they put them in these military-style camps to try to, force the internet out of them, which of course we know is the opposite, okay? Because addiction is the opposite of connection. So if you take your child away in a military-style camp, they're not connecting with the very people they need to, which is their family.
Absolutely.
There needs to be a reason why you want to connect. You need to make dinner time important. You need to make it important to go and watch your children play sports. You need to encourage your children to do other activities, whether it's sports or art or music or whatever. We need to be doing that throughout their lives, and we need to find balance in our lives, and of course model it for ourselves, being that mindful, talking to them about your own journey, about your own tech addiction and what you're working on and what you saw happen with your own behavior. Because as soon as kids hear us talk like that, they go, oh, they get me.
Well, if we're asking our kids to put their phones away, then we need to be.
Yeah, we need to be mindful.
We need to be mindful, and we need to focus on those micro moments.
Yeah.
Trish, this has been a fantastic conversation. And I'm so excited that we were able to talk, because I've wanted to talk to you for quite some time.
It's been such a pleasure for me. And I do agree with you. I think that they're important conversations. We have a lot more to talk about. A lot more about technology. We don't really know where we're going, to be honest.
No.
It's only going to get more powerful, the technology that's in our hands right now, and the point is that we just need to stay informed as parents. We need to stay informed, and we need to be strong.
Knowledge is power.
We need to be strong together. We need to ask for help when we're struggling, and we need to not be afraid of being a parent rather than a friend to our child.
Absolutely.
Like we can be friends later when they're grown-ups.
We could be friends later. You know what? I'll be friends with you later. Right now,
Yeah. Right.
here's how it's going to roll.
Oh, you don't like me? When I took my daughter's phone away from her for 3 months in grade 11, she did not like me.
No.
And she still jokes about that at 21 years of age. But she definitely did not like me. And that's okay, because she remembers that lesson well. And
my daughter didn't like me when I said she was 6 years old and she wanted something in the store. And I was way out in North Vancouver and I lived in White Rock. And she said, can I have these? And they were those alphabet letters that go on the fridge.
Yeah.
And I said, you already have a set. You don't, but mine aren't sparkly like this. I want these. I said, no, I'm sorry. I'm not getting them for you. And she turned to me and she said, you don't know how to love me.
Mm.
And I said, oh, I sure do. Get your carcass in the car. And it was a long drive home. My mom didn't even talk to me. She knew I was so upset. I pulled into the yard. I said, wait here. And my mom watched the kids. And I went up to her room and I took 2 huge bins and I put all her items in those bins. And I said, and I brought her into her room and I said, this is what love looks like, because you have so much. And this was something that you were willing to, you thought that this would make you happy, those little alphabet letters, and it doesn't. You're going to have to earn it back. Ireland still talks about that day.
It does. A friend of mine who's an addictions counselor in White Rock always says this line, and it's just so powerful. I don't know if he got it from Gabor Mate. I feel like it's a Gabor Mate line, but it's addiction is an external reach for internal well-being.
Oh, wow.
That's really, really powerful. I'm pretty sure it's
wow.
Right? So think about
external reach
for internal
well-being.
So whenever we have to go outside of ourselves to feel
yes,
no matter if it's that next pair of shoes or if it's the furniture or the painting, it doesn't really matter what it is. When we need to do that, then we have to question, is that going to make me feel better about who I am?
Yes. Because, and that's the core of what we're talking about, Trish, because the reality is, when we're talking about social media and we are actually going outside of ourselves to get everything we need, and we're not going internally. And this is the power of this.
That's the anxiety, that's the depression, because you don't feel connected to the world because you're always reaching outside of yourself for that which it needs to come from inside. And
talking,
you are, right?
Talking about Amanda Todd for a moment, you know, she was reaching out. She wanted to be seen.
Of course.
And who doesn't want to be seen? But when the reality struck that, you know, I don't have any friends anyway, and it began to crumble, you know, that's where you move into these very painful aspects of the dark side of this need for connection.
Well, and look at the popularity of the television series 13 Reasons Why.
Oh,
why do children want to watch that? Think about it. Because they see it and they see their lives. They see the challenges that they're facing. And so, you know, when you look at a show like that, it frightens most of us as adults. It absolutely frightens us. Yeah. But they're talking about very difficult subjects, and we need to be honest with our children, because anything they talk about in 13 Reasons Why they can find on the internet in 5 minutes.
I know.
So, but let's not talk about suicide, because then you might, you know, provoke somebody to have suicide ideations. Well, we know that's garbage. I bring suicide counselors into my classroom to talk about suicide, to give the kids all of the information they could possibly need, and then the help if they think somebody is going to hurt themselves. And and those kinds of things are difficult conversations, right? And if we don't have those conversations, all the difficult conversations, then our kids are going to continue to have more anxiety and more depression. right? We need to have those hard conversations, and we need to continually tell our children that we love them, that we are here for them, and that yes, we're flawed and we're making mistakes all the time, but we're going to do the best that we can to show you that you're loved unconditionally, even when you're nasty to me, which of course happens, right?
Yes. Now, how, and maybe we can wrap up with this, but so somebody is listening who is saying, yeah, you know what, I am struggling with this addiction. I want to branch out a little bit more. What can they do? What do you do? How do we move?
As an adolescent or as an adult?
Adolescent.
Well, for adolescents, one of the things you actually mentioned, which was to delete the social media apps, helps a lot. And a lot of my students have told me that they've done that simply because they can still get to their social media application by going through Safari or Google, but it makes it that much harder. And when it's a little bit more work, then they aren't as compelled to click on it when they have 2 seconds. So just a simple little thing like that. Consider downloading Moment to let you have an idea of how many hours you actually spend on your phone and how many times you check it. And it touch the home button. It checks just to see your checking behaviors. Because
Trish, that you say that it really gets me, because I didn't read one of these little lovely facts, but it said not only does a quarter of the teenagers, online is 52 hours a week, but picked up their device nearly 1,500 times per week for close to 3 hours a day.
Yeah, it's in their hands all the time, right? They don't let go of it, right? You see.
No. You take a phone away, it's like.
That's similar to OCD behaviors, right?
Yeah.
Compulsive behaviors, which of course it isn't OCD, but it is definitely what we see in the brain, at least what the research says we see in the brain, is it's very closely correlated with what we see in addiction, right? In gambling addiction, porn addiction, doesn't really matter what, it's that immediate hit of dopamine to the reward pathway. And so we think, maybe this text, maybe this. And so if they can do that, I understand that the latest software update for iPhone, I just got it from my, I just got an email today. I belong to an online community of a director who she wrote and produced and directed the film Screenagers. Have you heard of the film Screenagers? You can only see it. You can only see it by going to. You can only see it by going to an actual screening of it.
Okay.
But I highly recommend it. And right now she's got the 10 best documentaries to watch as a family. I will send it to you so that you can put it on your website. But films to watch with children and teens, and one's called Dealt. Another one is Won't You Be My Neighbor? Touch the Sound. Some very powerful. I haven't seen most of these, so I look forward to looking at them and seeing what she's recommending. But basically, the director of this film, Screenagers, is talking about exactly what we're talking about, talking to all the experts on what can we do differently, how can we help our children, how can we balance, and it is going to be, it's going to continue to evolve, this story, because the biggest challenge being, of course, as you and I know, is that artificial intelligence is changing at such a rapid growth that now my latest Scientific American Mind that just came in my inbox that I haven't had a chance to read yet is how artificial intelligence is starting to show emotion now. They're starting to figure that out because, of course, that's what delineates, right? Human beings.
That's right. Absolutely.
Artificial intelligence is that it doesn't know how to appreciate a piece of art.
Right.
But now we're talking, that this could very possibly be by 2050, the ability of a computer to do that. To
Unreal.
You and feel and read your emotion by looking at your face right now and be able to say, you touched your fingers to your mouth. Well, that means, and unfortunately, as you and I both know, a lot of our children don't know how to read anything. They don't know how to read our facial gestures anymore because they're not having conversation. So
they're not having conversations. And so I think that we are beginning to create the conversation because like you're suggesting, we're going to need to have harder conversations than this in the years to come. And so we need to start getting used to these conversations. And this is why this show is so important to me, because I don't care about being in a studio. You know, like the sun is dropping and it's weird lighting. Deal with it. It's like, this is a conversation that we have to have, and we have to have it at 9:00 at night in the summer, because this is important. And you're in your home, I'm in my home, and everyone else viewing and listening is in their homes. And we need to create this kind of conversation. And so what you're saying is micro moments matter. You're saying you're drawing an attention to where when a kid is, or not a kid, but the age of identity, right? Yeah. You said identity exploration and identity commitment, and where technology is coming in right at those peak moments, and it's creating an imbalance or a skewed sense of what that identity
they don't have the ability to process that yet. Their brains are not fully developed. Right. We need to help them with that. We didn't even get to talking about the binge drinking culture that is completely different than when we were in university and You're right. And
which is why you have to come back on the show. Yeah.
There's a phenomenal article in The Atlantic about binge drinking culture in college campuses.
Oh, we got to talk about this.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff, because
it's powerful.
That's what we're seeing, like UBC right now. I went to UBC, and at UBC, they have full-time security guards on 24/7 now. Yeah. Not just because of how dangerous it is for young women on campus. 1 in 5 women have a very, very great possibility of being raped on campus. 1 in 5 before they graduate.
1 in 5.
1 in 5. And so that's that. But then there's the binge drinking culture that corresponds. And the article talks a lot about why is that? And one of the big things, which is, again, something we didn't touch on, is the difference between the parenting of that day and our day today, and the hover parenting, the helicopter.
That's right.
Snowplow parenting. There's lots of different terms, meaning different degrees of protection, and this inability of parents to allow their children to fail, to see failure as a good thing, and therefore to allow them to make mistakes, so that by the time they are finally free of you, which is in university, that then they are making calculated risk benefit ratio. They're looking at it and saying, is it worth it to do that? I don't know. You're always going to have the kid that's going to binge to blackout when we were kids. But now it's more the norm than it was when we were kids. And what the experts are starting to guess, and of course they're not sure, they can't prove it, but they're starting to see that there has a lot to do with the way these kids have been parented. That their parents were the same parents that were giving their kids shots in the rec room downstairs when they were in grade 11, so that they're safe. At least they're safe then. I know my children are safe. But the problem with that flawed thinking is that when we do that, when we give our children alcohol because we think they're going to get it anyway, Trish. Right. What are you, just some naive parent? No, I'm not. What I am is a parent who knows that developmentally our children need to take risks to find out what's worth it and what isn't worth it. If I do this, will I lose my parents' respect and trust? And that needs to matter to them. So if you're the parent giving them the vodka and then you say, well, they're safe that way because I know how much I gave them, who are you kidding? That you don't think they can get more vodka? Like they can get as much as they want. So you gave them some and you literally said it's okay to break the law. So and not only you gave them something, Trish, but now you're responsible. Oh yeah. And has that ever entered up the person who's doing the boot, the person that's doing it? Yeah. Is it ever entered their mind that if somebody gets injured or somebody gets set up for an addiction and you're the one that's been supplying, of course, that's actually on you? But even if people don't go that far, even most people, sadly, only really think about their own children, right? They really do. And I say that sadly because as an educator who loves my job, I look at all of my students as my children. So I treat my students the way I treat my own children. I love them. I care about them deeply, and they know that. So I would never I'll do that. I don't think for a second that I would want to provide alcohol and then say, you can stay safely in the basement suite and no driving. I'll take everybody's keys. Well, all I've done is tell you that it's okay to break the law and that I'm going to help you do it. And that is a twisted sense of growth, because I've taught my children that I'm their friend and I will take all the risk for them. And that's dangerous. They need.
And you know what else is dangerous, Trish? And I think that this conversation that we're having is powerful. And of course, we're going to have you back on to have that conversation. But what you just said there, you know, let's bring it back to the original conversation where, so we are empowering our kids to, if we're not monitoring, if we're not taking care of this social media aspect, if we're not taking care of the hours that they're connected, then this text, this sextortion, this cyberbullying, the threats, the
anxiety, depression, like basic.
We have what you're basically saying is wake up. We must
literally disempowering
better. We need to be better. And we need to be better. I need to be better. You need to be better. And you and I both know that. And I think most parents know that too. Yeah, but we also need to ask our kids to be better. And when we ask them to be better, we need to show them. And so some of the points that you've made that I think are so important are, we must start communicating again. That's how we can be better. We must start to share our life with
in the happy moments, in the tough moments too.
The sad ones.
We need to reach to our friends to help us parent.
Yes.
We need to reach to our teachers. We need to be honest with our teachers. I would tell you one of the most common complaints of teachers is, I didn't know that kid lost his mother. I didn't know that kid was struggling with clinical anxiety. Why? Because everybody hides it. Why? Because of stigma. But if you are a parent of a grade 9 boy who has struggled with cyberbullying and has all these issues, if you can just trust one teacher, just one teacher, find out what the teachers are like. I understand that you can give the information to anybody, but find a teacher that you know has good reputation and trust them with that information. And then get them to help you parent their child. I have done that for all 3 of my children. I have made sure that there were colleagues that I was working with that were my my children's teachers, that they knew what my kid was suffering from if I knew I could trust them.
Wow.
Then they help me parent my child. So reach out to each other. Remember that addiction, the core of addiction is an external reach for internal well-being. Remember that conformity and all of the ideas of social norms, the social media is absolutely primal. We all fall into it, but that children's brains aren't fully developed yet. So we need to help them with that. Remember that we need to set limits. We need to have rules around technology in our house, and it will not be easy. There will be fights and they will not like you. And you need to stick by your guns, not expect the teacher to only do it, to take the phones out of the classroom, but for you to take the phones out of their hands at certain times. Dinner time, no phones in the hands. Bedtime, no phones in the hands. Those are 2 simple times where you should not be allowing phones in their hands. Yeah. And by the way, the same thing goes for our millennials in the workforce now, right?
Absolutely.
Simon Sinek talks about there should not be phones in the boardroom. There should be no phones in the boardrooms, because that's how you and I as colleagues get to know each other. And then I start to care more about who you are.
That's
because
right.
We have micro moments of you and I talking about your dad or your mom not being well.
That's right.
That's how we do
let's start caring more. And you can't care enough. You know, it's so important. And so I just want to say thank you, Trish. This has been an enlightening conversation. And I know that, you know, the listeners are feeling the same that I'm feeling. And I have a sense that there's still more in the Trish Wagner well that I need to, I gotta tap into that. And I hope that you give me another opportunity to.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. And I hope it helps some people. I know it helps me just talking about it. It just reinforces, right? We're always learning.
Well, and I think another point of conversation is to talk about what you actually are doing in the classroom, because I think for parents and for grandparents or guardians or whomever, it would be very helpful to really see what you're doing. I know my daughter was in your class, and I tell you, it created incredible conversation. And the fact that someone that I never met before was saying the things that I have been saying for years was the most powerful thing that it just beautiful. So thank you for doing all of this. And thank you for loving all of these kids that you've loved for 30 years. You truly are a treasure. And there's something here that you are just amazing.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.